I simply couldn't let this one go. Some people regard him as one of the greatest strikers of all time. Our dear friend, Gary Lineker. I loved him when I was younger. I thought he was amazing. But that was because he kicked a ball about. He never actually opened his mouth. Because when he does, the most nonsensical, hypocritical tosh escapes from it. And I'm beginning to think he doesn't really know it's happening and it's just spewing uncontrollably. Let's start with hypocrisy. He takes on a refugee for a few weeks, then later has a go at me, calling me vile on social media, instigating a pile-on because I dared to support Priti Patel's turn-back policy, which I didn't think he was actually allowed to comment about, seeing as it's political and he works for the BBC. But hey-ho, one rule for Gary. But despite his supposed support for refugees, he's more than happy to go to the Qatar World Cup, which makes no secret of its treatment of migrants and refugees, basically like slaves, many dying building the very stadiums he's off to commentate at. The same place whose treatment of LGBT people is abhorrent, another cause Gary claims to show affinity towards. He even went on about masks, but then was caught without one in a store and blamed it on his old age. Now, I ignored Gary because that is usually the best thing to do, but I'm afraid I couldn't let this one go. In his latest gaffe, he claims because of his darker skin, he's experienced racism. I almost choked on my drink. I bet he wished I had, because I wouldn't be around to point out how ludicrous that sounds. This is what he said on the High Performance podcast. Without being good at sport, life would have been very different for me, but because I was, I think I would have been bullied at school. I was kind of marginally that way anyway, because I was this tiny, geeky kid with darkish skin, and I had pretty much racist abuse, although I'm as English as they come. Ridiculous. Gary, you haven't got a clue about racism. And that very comment is almost racist in itself. The bit where you say that you are as English as they come, which translates to me that you perceive darker people to be less English, which is why you felt the need to justify yourself and explain it. That's my interpretation of it anyway, because I hear those sort of comments all the time. This last bit makes me laugh. He said, whether that was part of something that made me, I don't know. But other people might not be able to handle that. And this is even worse than Meghan Markle's claims. At least she's half black. Some people may well have been racist towards her, but Gary Lineker appears to be taking on some sort of cultural appropriation, as though he understands my pain. So let me give you an idea of what it's like to be black. When you, say, initiate a pile-on to your 8.2 million followers against a single black female, somebody who is actually black, can you imagine the racist abuse that comes with that? Oh, yes, of course you can, because when you are slightly tan, but as you say, English as they come, you've experienced racism. What an insult to those of us that live with it on a daily basis, Gary. I've experienced racism all my life, and it often comes from so-called do-gooders like yourself. The sort of people who diss the Rwanda plan because it is such a terrible place, having never visited it. How do they know it's horrible? It seems good enough for the leaders of the Commonwealth and for the EU when they sent migrants there. But these so-called do-gooders think that they're doing good by condemning it, but what they're actually doing in most cases is revealing, in my view, a level of racism that they haven't even noticed. For people like me who experience it, and it cuts like a knife, Gary, every time. But we learn to deal with it because it is based on ignorance. Can I get a split screen with Gary, please? I'm black, Gary. You're white. Your comments trivialise the experience of racism that people of colour like me go through. May I suggest, Gary, that you stick to things you know, like promoting unhealthy food and tossing a ball?